Chill, easy. It's not play. You guys play, you get kicked out. No, hey, stop it. No fucking playing. Fucking roughhousing. That's fucking roughhousing.
Alright, hello and welcome to CherrySTEM number something. 32, maybe?
Number something.
We are now doing it more than once a month, so the numbers got a little wonky. Harder to keep track of, but that's good news for you guys because it means more episodes for you to listen to on your way to whatever. Maybe a nice little moment on the toilet, maybe your way to work, maybe something else. I'm not judging. You can listen to us wherever you want. And hopefully, in the future, soon, with the help of our patrons, we can also be on Spotify and all the other places where podcasts exist. So yeah, that's our 5-month plan.
Yeah, we want your toilet time. I like to have people think of me while they're on the toilet.
Most certainly. And whatever it is you do while you're on the toilet. So, speaking of being on the toilet, when you're there, go hang out with us on patreon.com/AnnaCherry. It's a good time to browse the Patreon and see if there's any reward tiers that might appeal to you, because this show is brought to you by patrons such as yourself. So check out patreon.com/AnnaCherry. I recommend Challenger mode tier of rewards, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's just jump into it.
Going on the Patreon thing, patrons, the patronage of the Medici is what created the Renaissance. I mean, it's, a patronage is the way that some massive positive changes have been seen in the world. So I'm glad that trend's kind of coming back, because it allows people to support things that they think will actually make a difference. But did you want me to get straight into the thing that I want to do, or did you have some introductory stuff you want to do first?
I already did.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know if there was more. Okay. Well, I kind of got on a little insect kick here for a little bit, because one of the stories that was a news story is about insects, and we're going to get back to that because we've got kind of a tie-in with some of the other stories, etc. But just starting right out, one of the things that is kind of been in the news and on people's minds a little bit, and unfortunately, it's kind of been as usual, something for politics to pass back and forth and pervert and end up making into an issue that it shouldn't be. It should be for everyone. But
I'm sorry, did you say pass back and forth and pervert?
Yes.
I think I've seen that before now.
Yeah, exactly. They're snowballing it. This issue is snowballing. It really is. The issue is the insect apocalypse, and you've probably heard of it.
Sorry, insect or incest? What are we talking
the
about?
incest apocalypse. You gotta watch out for that one. It's snowballing, and
I love it. So don't you guys want this to be on your Spotify and iTunes?
Yes,
and everywhere
absolutely. So the insect apocalypse is basically, well, one of the things, there was a study came out that where, like, over the past 20 something years, something like that, there's been a decline of around 75% of the total biomass of insects that are generally around. Now, right off the bat, if you don't think about it too much, don't think about it too hard, kind of put it out of your head, like, oh, whatever. I hate insects anyway; they suck. But if you've ever spent any time looking at things like keystone species, then you understand, how cascading effects work, and how the systems that are complex have lots of different factors that start to snowball once again. Now, because there are these cascades where this failure leads to this failure leads to this failure, and you end up with
a golden shower cascade?
It is. You have these feedback loops, and so that's kind of the typical thing. So in my mind, the insect issue, which I'm going to discuss a couple of other things around it, is way bigger than it even seems, really, right off the bat. It's kind of a very difficult thing, but when it comes down to it, like one of the things that has recently been a politicization of it is the Trump's EPA does this with this chemical, and let me first right off the bat say it doesn't have to fucking do with Trump. It has to do with huge corporations being involved, because this has been going on for a while. Yeah. The only thing that you can contribute to Trump.
He did appoint the head of the EPA.
He did appoint a dickhead EPA.
But not like there's been any changes.
But okay, for like 4 years though, they've been doing this emergency. See, people did this association thing because he did the whole emergency declaration thing, and then it's specifically this loophole that the EPA has been using for like 4 years. To allow a specific chemical to be used. Is it
Monsanto?
No, in this case it's Dow.
What a
yeah,
big difference.
I know. Yeah, exactly. That's the actual villain here. It's not Trump, even though he did appoint a dickhead.
Corporatism
to the EPA. Yeah, the only thing that did is okay. Looking at it I'll give them some tiny bit of credit that the fact that we've got all this information that keeps stacking up, and more and more and more information is available, and that the more recent information should have made them go one direction, and that is basically reducing the use of sulfoxaflor is what it's called, but instead they've expanded it. So that's what. So the most recently, it didn't just continue. It actually they expanded the use of it, and so the kind of the story behind this is go ahead.
World War I was the first time the Dow Chemical became involved with the military. They made phenol and other chemicals to be used as munitions for the United States during the war.
Yeah, no, Dow's been right up the butt of the military-industrial complex for a very long time.
That's what set it off, and so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just misremembering or misattributing involvement in killing innocents in the Middle East to Dow Chemicals. But yeah, they did it, and not just that, but maybe
okay. So, but here's the thing. So, sulfoxaflor is this chemical that Dow basically wanted to promote as bee friendly, when in fact it actually kills bees more.
Oh,
it actually does
as soon
even
as you
worse.
said bee friendly,
it's even worse. And so of course in Europe they're banning this shit because it's even worse than the other chemicals. Yeah. But here they basically, they're the people. What do they call the people who
lobbyists?
Pay off? The guys who do all the bribing. They were basically making it seem like this is the only chemical anybody could possibly use. So they have to spray something. So we want to keep them from producing any crops at all, which is of course just a ridiculous, pathetic, stupid, weak argument. But anyway, so we just actually increased. We first switched over to something that was worse for bees, and then now just recently we've massively increased it, and the number of states in which they're going to be using it. So there's and these states have lots of just huge amounts of cropland that's going to be used on. So anyway, then this is in the face of more recent information about how we're finding out more and more about the decline of insects all over the world. And so insects, I mean, hopefully I don't have to, talk about insects lead to birds and pollination, and then that birds and pollination lead to other animals that feed on them, and those other animals, there's all of these things they're not separate.
And it makes us food.
They're connected. Eventually, it comes down.
And then you die.
Yeah, right. And then you die is the end of it. And so, whenever people are like, "Oh yeah, these fucking greenies, they just want to save all the stupid animals," it's like, no, it's talking about us.
Save some animals.
Oh, us to not die. Us to not fucking have a horrible starvation thing going on. But anyway,
right.
So
we're talking about not just all insects. So wait, is that intersex? Should they be added to the list of?
So yeah,
protected species.
So it's basically it's Dow who's responsible for this shit.
Bees in particular are very important.
Oh God, yes.
Let's just say that.
Okay, and then so that leads to so almost certainly the whole colony collapse disorder and things that have been going on. They've been directly tracing it to pesticides
for
over and over
a decade
and over.
or more. Colony collapse has been an issue for a while.
Yes, but so anyway, so in the news just recently is once again one of the largest beekeepers in the U.S. Lost more than half of their bees, and basically all the different
almonds,
the various, not just almonds. It was that's just one of the ones they brought up. No, it's all of the various crops across the U.S. They're calling the beekeepers, and tons of the beekeepers are saying we won't be able to service you. We won't be able to service you. So what we're talking about here is just in the coming
farming.
Yeah, in the coming year, you're talking about a huge hit to farming, which is going to drive up food prices, which are going to lead to just huge hits of the economy.
Season, right?
And so you can trace right from Trump's decision to have a dickhead who deregulated to destruction of the economy. You can trace it. It doesn't take that many steps.
Question though, what about Europe and their bees?
I think they've actually had some recovery.
Because I know bees, travel, but I don't know how far they migrate.
Yeah, I don't know, but I do know that they are banning this specific one because there's just massive evidence that and you know what the study came out? It showed that it was killing half of the colonies. It just so happens that most recently the largest beekeeper lost more than half of his colonies. But so anyway, so that's a huge issue that's going on, and it's not, the bees are the ones that most quickly and directly impact us, so it should be easy for even people who can't understand complex effects and can't understand cascades and can't understand things like keystone species, and they don't get those kinds of things because it's like there's more than one step. I mean, I can't think more than one step. You know, they can't get that. They can get this.
How do we know it's the pesticide that's doing it?
Because it directly kills them, and that you can't. Okay.
I'm playing the devil's advocate.
Okay. When you spray something in massive amounts that is poisonous, and then the animals are in contact with these
and
things,
then they don't come back and they die.
And these volatile chemicals stay in the environment for long periods of time. Then you don't just have the killing of the bees, you also have the killing of all the other. And so it's almost certainly these newer generations and expansive continual pushing of new chemicals, more expensive chemicals on the part of these large corporations that are part of this, because there are other methods that had we actually put some thought into alternative methods of dealing with this problem instead of brute force. Dow Chemical came up with this way of doing it, so that's the way we're going to do it instead of
giving them all the authority.
Because there are various like, for instance, one of the things that we did with genetic engineering was specifically.
I have stories about that.
Was it specifically, and this is a good segue. Mm-hmm. Was specifically to increase the plant's ability to withstand the poison that we're dumping on it. Whereas what they could have done is spliced in things where there's lots of natural plants that have defense against insects, that these particular crop plants may not have those defenses against the insects. And so we could have been, instead of splicing in resistance to neurotoxic poison, we could have instead been splicing in things that were natural and not as detrimental to human neurology, detrimental to the bees and to all the other insects, and destroying our environment and eventually our capability to produce not just food on the short term, but on the very long term. So, that's
a word on that is I'm not sure what this means in terms of like pounds of food, because of exchange rate is a thing. But comment from chat is accurate that U.S. is the largest world food exporter when it comes to dollars, in dollars.
So it's going to hit the world economy.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, at least we won't be going. We're taking everybody with us.
Well, economy versus the poor people. I think it'll hit people who can't afford stuff first.
Right. Exactly. And who cares about the people who can't afford stuff? Fuck all of them, right?
So, speaking of fucking people, genetics and shit. Let's talk for just a second about the life and rebirth. So we talked about death right now, actually. Life, death,
That's
rebirth,
now on to positive
robots.
news.
We do have these basically two approaches to gene editing. I learned today. There's the old tried and true method of gene editing, which is they take a vector. A vector is a virus. I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. I thought vector was something else, but no. They take a virus and then they take out all of the stuff that makes it. So viruses are very robotic-like, from what I understand.
They're literally like fucking land. They have like little feet. One particular one has it's a little icosahedron on top of a little fucking lander, like a little fucking moon lander, and then it lands with its little fucking feet, and then injects the code in, and then the code splices in.
Yeah, so they took one of those, not specifically, but a virus, and they took out all the infectious stuff out of it, and they put in a snippet of DNA that they wanted to replicate, so to inject, basically.
Yeah, well, the detrimental things. In other words,
right.
So
they took
a virus is basically
the viral.
Right. So there's the package, which basically is the delivery system, right. And then there's what it delivers is replicating itself typically. Whereas what we can do is take out the code that says replicate yourself as a virus, and instead put in code that says make this change to this part of the genome, and that's basically how you do the gene editing stuff.
Yeah. So that's the tried and true method, and they inject it intraamniotically into already existing fetuses. So there was a study that came out in 2018 in April, April of last year, and it's a Journal of New England Medicine, and they basically have this thing called XHED, XLHED. Sorry, it's X-linked hypohidrotic ectodermal dysplasia. So it's a sweat gland issue.
Okay.
And ectodermal dysplasia, their mouth doesn't form right. They're,
okay.
Yeah.
So it's some sort of genetic
It's a genetic abnormality. Yeah. So,
Okay.
they did this gene editing with mice for specifically XLHED, and the mice were fine. Obviously, the mice had the mutations to have them have this issue, and then they gave them genetic treatment to see
Okay,
if
so
they
what
fixed
you're
it.
talking about is
Genetic
therapy.
Genetic therapy, yeah. So that's the way in which we currently have altered genetics, and there's a study that came
Well,
out.
there's two different ways. Let me
just wait.
Go ahead.
I got this. I got all of this.
No, you don't got what I've got.
Okay, well, I probably don't, but just let me finish. So they did this. Why the study came out? This is just about mice.
Mm-hmm.
They did this with humans,
mm-hmm.
and so they had 3 babies. 2 of them were twins. One was a regular one, and they injected them at 26 weeks or so, and they had this genetic disorder, and so they were treated in the same way that mice were, and so far they're about 22 months of age.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to be doing well. They don't have the issue. So this is essentially one of the first cases of changing human genetics.
Right. At what?
And then there's the CRISPR.
Was this when they were infants? When they were fetuses?
They were interamniotic. So they were fetuses at 26 and 31 weeks, and the other one was at 26 weeks.
Okay, because see, typically genetic engineering is done for the at a stage where you just have like a single cell, where that's where it's typically
fetuses.
done, and then that's like genetic engineering where you're splicing things for one specific cell, which then of course that goes throughout the organism because the organism comes from that one cell. But once you've got a bunch of cells, then it's difficult to deal with it. And that's why one of the things with genetic therapy is that you have to produce tons and tons of this vector that has your genetic package, that's genetic alteration, to alter all the cells that are in a given body that hold that that piece of bad code that you want to clip out or change or whatever.
So you have to do that for each cell, and
so every virus has to find a cell in your body and alter it.
So how did they do that with fetuses?
Well, that's what they're doing is they're they just produce a bunch of the virus with the
in the vector.
Right. Well, the basically the delivery system with the edited code in it, they have to produce a bunch of that. So you've got tons of it, and that circulates throughout the body and then infects all the various cells with it and then makes the changes. But it's just so there's a difference between the genetic engineering that's kind of a lot like. We did ancestral breeding where we just mixed breeds of animals and things like that. And then that kind of went to, then we can make these certain genetic changes on a single cell, that is going to, become a larger animal. And then, the problem is more difficult once it's become a multicellular, fully formed animal. That's where all of these various, pluripotent cells have become specialized cells, and it becomes more and more difficult as an animal becomes more specialized. So
right, and of course the real sort of rub for implementing genetic research on a wide scale for humans is that it's humans, it's people, and we don't know what the fuck we're doing. So especially with CRISPR, so that's kind of my second point on this. So the 2 different ways in which we do genetic research, genetic editing or genetic therapy. So we have this tried and true, so to speak, method with interamniotic vector and genetic code alteration delivery system, and we just had our first trial with humans with that, basically. So there comes in China now. We have our good old CRISPR twins. And of course, I'm looking at an article which new evidence came out that these children, they were edited by CRISPR, which is, I will have you explain it because I don't fully understand how CRISPR works. And it's CRISPR, CRISPR. It stands for a particular area of the genetic code, I guess. I don't know. I'll let you take that over, but I just want to point out that these genes were modified by before birth by Chinese scientists, and they were supposed to make them HIV resistant. I'm sure they did, but they might have had their brains inadvertently enhanced. Oops.
Oops. Yeah, that was totally an accident.
China made children to have better learning and memory inadvertently as they were making them resistant to AIDS, because AIDS is such a problem in China.
Right, and they wouldn't do anything like that might be labeled eugenics. Never. They would
It
never
was an
do
accident.
that. It was totally an accident. That
Even
they
though
just
eugenics
happened
is
to make them smarter.
Poor word. That word has such a bad rap because one asshole was pouring bleach water into gypsies' eyes at one
And
point.
then they called that.
And they called that science.
Right, it's like that, whatever.
So how does CRISPR work?
Oh, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you how it's...
Well, I mean, what's the difference between CRISPR and the vector?
Okay, well, like CRISPR-Cas9 is a system that was borrowed from
I know
some,
so little about it.
Yeah, it was borrowed from some bacteria or something that we found that was doing this gene editing. But basically, what it does is it's got a system that kind of reproduces itself. And so, in other words, like, okay, so you got to think of it as genes are being read and mRNA is being produced off of it, and or different types of things. It's a lot like a program. Now, some people in biology don't like that. Some people do, but I tend to like calling it like it's like a program. It isn't specifically a program because it's more complex than that, but basically, as it's running along and reading off code, because that's what it's actually doing, what can happen is how viruses typically act is that they splice into an area in the DNA that as it's read off, the instruction is for the cell to then produce more of the viruses. And usually that ends up where it just gets caught in a loop, creates more and more of the viruses until the cell explodes, and then those go out, infect more cells, kill off those cells, and eventually it either kills the animal or the immune system overcomes it. But CRISPR is something different, where the idea behind it is that it kind of short circuits the typical Mendelian inheritance traits. Like, in other words, like
Mendelian or Mengelian, because we did talk about eugenics.
So we know how there's like this random component of whether or not you're going to get the
well, it's 25 to 75.
Yeah, well,
dominant recessive.
Dominant recessives. Yeah, right, exactly. It's not these,
On
but
average.
there's some semi-random component that determines whether or not you're going to get the father's gene or the mother's gene, and so there is that is short-circuited by this system where it always ensures that because it'll basically, if the other gene is there, it'll go and replace it with the information that was there, instead of the as it's going and the genes are combining. Instead of combining, it overwrites, and so absolutely every offspring will always have this particular whatever you do with CRISPR. And so why that's dangerous is because the random variation that is present in genetics is part of a system. It's not a fucking accident. Well, I mean, it is an accident from a certain perspective, but the reason why animals persist and have these complex systems is because they are successful, and so that's what I mean, not an accident. In other words, it's defined by their success, that this randomness is part of an adaptive system for making sure that you have to have some genetic drift. You have to have lots of attempts to find what the future's going to do. That's what genes are doing. Yeah, exactly. Genes are exploring every possibility in kind of a random.
I remember it was under debate when I was first in college in 2006, because I was talking to somebody who wanted to be I was talking to an ex who wanted to be a geneticist, and he was like, and I brought up genetic drift, and it was like,
well, there might be some specific.
Because I was like, what is it even? I just know that there was controversy around whether or not it's a thing, but then again, there's controversy around epigenetics too, and it's clearly a thing.
Yeah.
So, or genetic memory even.
There may be a more specific definition for the word genetic drift may be a symbol instead of just a
way to explain something.
Yeah, because genes drifting, is obvious.
Well, how I don't drifting where? How? I'm not sure.
In other words, changing small mutations that are not harmful.
Oh, drifting. Oh, so like when you're in the water, when you go into the ocean, and then you like come back out, and you're like 80 miles down from where you left your tower.
Yeah, there's this basically something. It's changing over time, and so genes tend to change little mutations here and there. And the thing is, we are finding out that mutations aren't nearly as random as we thought because they are strongly impacted by epigenetic factors, and epigenetic factors have to do with the experience of a single individual. So the single individual alters the epigenetic factors, which then cause the associated genes to be more likely to mutate, and specifically in the direction that they.
Why am I thinking about the pilot wave theory? That's like such a perfect example.
I have no idea why that's.
It doesn't even matter, but it's just such a perfect example how each individual's changes affects the entire pattern, because then they breed, interbreed, the genes drift, then each individual changes it, then they move, then they.
I see. That would be the genes of the lucky individuals.
I have the weirdest metaphors in my head right now.
Okay. Oh, genetic. Basically, talking about that some things have to do with luck. In other words, there is no specific survival advantage that that's what they're talking about with genetic drift, which is There's somebody that I'm just looking up a quick thing here. Is that there is basically a luck factor when it comes to what genes.
A luck factor, or it's all luck?
No, it's definitely not all luck.
Okay. That's what I heard, and I was like, wait,
no, a luck factor, and that's true because there are various genes that have
flood can wipe
have too little of an effect on the survivability of that individual for it to be important on whether or not they pass it along. So it's not going to have a large enough impact except over many generations. So therefore, that's going to play a significant role. That just the pure fucking luck is going to play some of a role, whereas there was no additional benefit or whatever conveyed by that specific
so they're kind
gene.
of just writers.
But then there's also so there are multiple factors. I think that's just they're trying to
quantify an example.
And maybe that's where that's what you're remembering is there was some idea of how much that luck factor was part of it versus directly. It's always because it gave some benefit specifically at this very smallest component, which really doesn't make any fucking sense.
Sometimes you just have writers that happen to have hitched a ride along with good genes, and they just don't really do much.
That's why you have some shit genes and some
vestigial organ.
Exactly. So yeah. But then, did you want to go on from there? Like where?
That's just basically talking about CRISPR and the difference between CRISPR and
genetic engineering.
Vector,
And so they are basically using CRISPR in genetic engineering here. So it is an application of something that means that all of the offspring of these humans will be. They won't have the possibility of any alterations to that area of their genetic code. In other words, from that point forward, every great-grandchild, great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchild of them, and so which as genes begin to mix, it starts to go throughout an entire population. That entire population will not have the opportunity of random drift or any kinds of changes to their genes in the area where the CRISPR alterations are present until some unless the alteration that happens is in the CRISPR portion of it where it makes it deactivate. So that's the only hope is that the system that this works on itself breaks in some way. But for the most part, when it comes to this genetic area, so long as the CRISPR system itself is not fucked up by random genetic changes that are happen through environmental damage to DNA or whatever, they will continue to give these traits to the rest of humanity over time, and so of course that's very dangerous given that you don't know that everything in genes is multi-layered data. When you make changes to somebody's fucking shape of their fingernails, you may be also like altering the thickness of the skin on their lips. I mean, there's so many fucking weird connections because of the way that the data is stored in DNA is not
one for one. It's multi-layered where it uses the same areas for widely different things just by looking at it from a different fucking angle. That's what the histones do, is they take the DNA and wrap it up into these other weird forms that then as it's read across it, you basically are rearranging. It's basically like rearranging words in a dictionary. It's like, it's no longer a dictionary if you start rearranging the words. It's
Yeah, one thing I learned that was the most, I guess, culture shock, if you can call it that, for being a humanities student, starting off with psychology in college and then going into like neuroscience when I had to learn biology and stuff. The one thing that was the biggest takeaway and a shock, I guess, was that how much of everything that happens in the body has to do with 3D shapes and magnetic interactions. So like so much of it is how it's shaped, and shapes change through charges and through interactions, and it's just how much of it is 3D basically.
Yeah.
They removed specifically the gene called CCR5, and now that they're looking at mice, they found that the same alteration that was introduced in the girls, I believe they're twins as well, DNA, not only makes mice smarter, but also improves human brain recovery after stroke. It could be linked to greater success in school, but of course they don't know.
But whenever they find little things like that,
yeah.
they don't necessarily know all the other small things that have been altered in one slight way or another.
Yeah,
That because these things are emergent. In other words, like the impacts might be small, right here, here, and here, but then when you add these other things, they add together. It's like made out of various puzzle pieces where it's kind of like programs that are modular and then can end up going together in a different way. We only have a part of a program, and it's only when it combines with this other one that it creates this other effect that is larger than each one of those small components by themselves. And so that's happening all throughout DNA.
So,
it's not one-to-one.
Great example though. The reason is like, why did they go after CCR5
because they were thinking it was one-to-one.
If it shows that it's been fucking around with mice's heads, why could it possibly have anything to do with HIV? Well, apparently the same gene, HIV requires it to enter the human blood cell. So same gene, stroke recovery. Well, I guess that kind of makes sense if it has to do with blood cells. But okay, learning and memory, stroke recovery, entering blood cells. There's a connection, but also what else can it be connected to? We don't know.
Yeah, and there's only
one way to find out, and it's for these
things
children to
are
grow
very
up,
finely tuned and balanced. Where when you have this one positive, you also have all of these various negatives that go along with it. Like what was it? Senescence. The process of senescence in cells has been this big thing in science, where it's basically anti-senescence technology is like, we can make it where cells don't age. Well, the senescence process is also part of wound healing. In other words, senescent cells are created as part of how we heal wounds and stuff. So you fuck with senescence too much, and basically you make people fragile in another way. And so there's always these fucking trade-offs and balances, because it's a system where you don't know the ways in which it's connected in weird fucking ways. I mean, it's just taking something that is like if you had this really complex program, there's all these various little components that do little things, and then if you just change you change one of them, well, it's used in a million other places. You can't, and if you just change it without knowing all the places that it's used, you could cause really complex cascading effects. And so that's the problem with just going and kind of brute force. Like, hey, this we see that this does this. Yeah, it does do that, and a whole bunch of other shit. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lack of care and kind of a cavalier attitude. That is what people are afraid is going to happen. And especially, I mean, I'm not particularly against genetic engineering in humans at all, actually. I mean, I think it's probably a damn good idea, except with fucking CRISPR, where you're just automatic. It's like, let's not just do genetic engineering. Let's make sure that whatever dumb decision we made right now that was completely uninformed because about a system we barely fucking understand, let's make sure that passes on to humanity through, let's make sure that just ends up in the entire human genome. our bad decision right now. Nah, this doesn't seem like a good idea to me.
So yeah, but they're not the only ones, because a Swiss biotechnology company is saying that it's gonna try to use CRISPR to treat patients with beta thalassemia, whatever that is. So they're going to be using CRISPR therapeutics.
Now, I mean, there is the possibility, Dan, because I haven't looked into it in a while, that they may be using, because it is CRISPR-Cas9 that I'm talking about, which is this gene drive thing. And so I'm not certain if there is not a component of the gene drive that is not self-replicating in that specific way. But that's the way I've understood it yet so far. You know?
Well,
so that's what...
this CRISPR one in Switzerland, in Zug, that's where Plexstorm is. Hey. So the beta thalassemia is, and they're using this in one specific patient, and they basically rely on transfusions because of this disorder. So the person's not already it's an older person, I'm assuming, obviously, I guess, and it's not like a baby that is going to have to grow up with these changes, and who knows what that's going to do. But so people with beta thalassemia inherit defective copies of the gene that makes hemoglobin. So once again, it's blood related. However, everyone's body has a second copy of the gene called fetal hemoglobin that gets shut off after we're born. So what they're trying to do is turn that fetal hemoglobin copy back on in people who wants.
Oh, I missed part of it because I was looking at CRISPR. Yes, but so they're trying to turn the hemoglobin back
I'm talking to you. There's no
Oh,
options
no!
of any kind. No, it's defective copies of the gene that makes hemoglobin.
Okay.
But everyone's body has a second copy of the gene called fetal hemoglobin that gets shut off after they're born. And in this trial, they're going to try to use CRISPR editing to turn fetal hemoglobin back on. So they have a defective one, and then they have a one that shuts off quickly after we're born, and they're going to try to turn that one back on. So good luck, I guess.
Yeah. Cause
and I mean, they're reliant on blood transfusions, so I mean, you know, that's an issue because they can't make hemoglobin, so that sucks.
Yeah.
But
I'm thinking that basically, I actually the gene drive thing years ago, because I won't say her last name because who knows if she wants to be associated with us in any way.
She doesn't.
But not publicly anyway. Right. But the someone we know who is well known for being a doctor and is studying.
And it's not my mom.
Right, studying genetics, and she's actually has some level of famousness, but the famousness or ishness. Yeah. So and I was talking to her about a way to do something that I call it a gene sweep virus, which is basically there's this process in during when what is it called, during apoptosis. When a cell does programmed cell death, it has these various stages that it goes through, and so it has to read through the various stages that are part of the code. Well, there's you could insert in part of the code that at that stage activate a viral release, and so this would be a way to basically make certain gene editing be communicable, and not only communicable, but one of the biggest problems of gene therapy is having to create all of these viruses. Manufacturing it, because you're making them, is extremely difficult. Whereas what I'm talking about is something that would be like a disease. It would be a disease that was doing what you intended, but now what you intend can be fucking stupid, even though you think it's a good idea. And so it's kind of like when I was telling her about it, I was actually telling her about it as part of an interesting like sci-fi plot that like I think it was like stage 7 specifically of the apoptosis program. And it was a particular stage at which it then hits this code, and then it starts producing virus, and you end up at the same result because apoptosis destroys the cell. Well, in this case, I'm destroying the cell with the production of virus, and then that viral load goes and infects the other cells, and then does nothing. In other words, after it goes in copies the section of code in, it then does nothing until the apoptosis signal is received by the cell. So if the cell is going to be destroyed anyway, your body's already selected it for destruction, and so then of course you get it to release more virus. So why is this bad? Because first of all,
why do that at all?
Oh,
why employ the apoptosis?
Oh, because this was part of a sci-fi kind of thing that's like where you basically have these people who believe that they want to change all of mankind.
But why does it have to be apoptosis? I don't understand. Why can't you just go in and just edit it?
Okay, because think about this. So if you're wanting to, because you have to have some way to have your body produce to have cells that will shed virus. So if they're shedding virus, how are they shedding virus? It destroys the cell.
Explosion.
Right, and so you don't want something that's constantly killing cells. Right. But if you got a cell that's going to be killed anyway, and then you use that to then kill it through a different means, which is to shed the virus, then you basically have a system that where a person, once they've contracted this disease, each cell will not be impacted by the virus until the point at which the cell is supposed to die anyway.
Right.
And so this is a convenient method by which you could basically use a disease to alter.
It's an ethical way of.
To alter all of it. Well, it's not ethical. It's just practical.
And ethical, not unethical.
Yeah, it's
one ethical way of doing it.
It's just a way of doing this, but it's fucking stupid from another perspective. Like because first off, the reason why there's lots of uses for apoptosis where it's just like if you didn't have this apoptosis signal working properly, your fingers would be wet. Like your body first produces like kind of when it first creates your fingers in the womb, it's kind of just a mass, and then apoptosis separates the fingers where the cells in between are killed off. Okay. And so that's one of the ways in which it's used. But another way in which it's used is when a cell is becoming cancerous or a variety, or it's been damaged in some way, so it's not functioning properly. There's lots of different ways that can cause a cell to ask to be destroyed. Right. Because that's what it does. It asks, should I be destroyed, by producing specific types of, expressing certain receptors, and then basically, if your body is sending the signal that basically says, I have the resources by which that it's okay to kill off these, what I'm specifically thinking of is in the liver. When you have cirrhosis of the liver, basically the problem is you have a bunch of scar tissue, and specifically, this is the way that cannabis helps heal the liver. Is that there's both there's the two different receptors that endogenous cannabinoids activate, which is CB1 and CB2, and CB1 is activates apoptosis, and CB2 activates cell division. So basically, it's sending both signals simultaneously, and typically that would mean that your body is signaling that you have enough resource to go ahead and kill off the damaged cells and start replacing it with the healthy cells that can replicate. And so the healthy cells get the signal from the exact same chemical, get the signal, replicate, and the unhealthy cells that which had to be there. You need to have scar tissue. And it can't just instantly be eliminated, because you could eliminate too much scar tissue at once, the scar tissue wouldn't function, etc. But anyway, then you get the signal for the scar tissue to be eliminated simultaneously, and that's how cannabinoids can actually help with cirrhosis. But so anyway, the point is that the problem with this is that, if you have a cell that's already kind of fucked up, and then you're going to have that produce, some sort of genetic altering system that is, because the first, right off the bat, the way that you do gene therapy is you use something like fucking Ebola as the delivery system. In other words, the outside shell that gets past your immune system, because that's what it's supposed to do, is it's supposed to get past your immune system and not be recognized by your immune system and destroyed, and instead be able to get into the cell and make the alterations. Well, then you take that, turn that into basically an infectious disease. Yeah, it's effective at spreading all the alterations to the gene throughout the body, but then you're using a system that could be basically replicating alterations that are negative. In other words, like something happened that damaged the DNA, the cell asked to be destroyed, and then instead of destroying itself properly with the systematic shutdown, which is basically what apoptosis does, instead it starts shedding virus that may be this fucking horrible thing, and so you'd end up basically creating like these weird diseases that would start spreading throughout the population and not be easily detected, and then you'd end up creating, but along with making alterations. So it's already bad enough that you're making alterations that you don't necessarily really understand in the first place, and making them communicable. Well, where in other words it would go from because you'd be constantly shedding virus, it would pass from person to person. So you could alter the genes of all of mankind in this way. But it's just such a horrifically bad idea, and so that's why I was kind of. And so she wasn't even really comfortable with me even fucking talking about it. But yeah, because it's the this idea itself is dangerous, because some fucking imbecile could decide, well, hey, that's a good idea, and I can do it perfectly because I'm so smart, and then they'll fucking release this horrific thing on mankind. So it's just kind of. Certain things are very uncomfortable to talk about, but here we are. They're kind of doing that, and this was before CRISPR was really a thing. That was talking about this method, and CRISPR is kind of like this gene sweep virus that I'm talking about. So except it's only, instead of it being a communicable disease, which would mean it happened really fucking fast. Instead, it happens more slowly, and it happens through breeding, and so there's at least some level of control. And but what I had was a souped up version of what's bad about CRISPR.
So let's tell it to the internet.
Yeah.
Here you go, folks.
Well, the thing is, if they listen,
Go hog wild.
They should be able to understand that the person who was telling you about it was also showing you all the ways in which this is so fucking horrible. This is
But
just
maybe that's what they want.
the worst goddamn idea.
Just want to watch the world burn.
The worst goddamn idea you could possibly do. I mean, it's just so bad. But it would do stuff, but it wouldn't do stuff that you wanted. That's for goddamn sure. But there's certain ideas that they're not cool, bro. Not cool.
So just to pivot for half a second to what we started with insects.
Yes.
So lab-grown meat. So we're talking about food dysregulation potentially. So it wouldn't be meat, obviously, unless the food that the meat eats is reliant on the bees and all that stuff, which it might be. But there's a new study that is showing that, actually I don't even know how they came to this conclusion, so we're going to have to check this out. But lab-grown meat may do more lasting damage to climate than regular beef, which blows my mind. Like, how?
What?
New study. So apparently proponents of...
New study by the Cattlemen's Association.
So of course, people who are proponents of it believe that it could supplant the beef industry, livestock, particularly cattle, which is a huge source of gas emissions. However, the issue here, and I think that's where the rub is that when the researchers were looking at emissions from cattle, they were just clumping it all together instead of looking at the ones that actually exacerbate greenhouse gases, such as methane specifically.
Right.
Then they also weren't really looking at carbon dioxide. The fact that methane remains, it does warm stuff up, but it only remains in the atmosphere for a decade or so. However, carbon dioxide persists.
And methane changes into carbon dioxide.
Does it?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know. Well, so this is the study where they were looking at emissions in terms of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and all of the specific gases. So cattle systems are associated with the production of all three greenhouse gases, and under continuous high global consumption, cultured meat results in less warming than cattle initially. But this gap narrows in the long term. In some cases, cattle production causes far less warming as the methane emissions do not accumulate, unlike CO2. So that seems to be the sort of, but while it does seem like a fun little thing to share with your anti-global, anti-climate change friends on Facebook, it seems like the perfect little clickbait to share. However, there are caveats. The fact is that they are assuming how much lab-grown meat there will be, as opposed to how much. And so this is the actual study. It was on Frontiers in Sustainable Food Systems. It was actually published in February 19th, 2019. So this just happened like 10 days ago. And well, originally, actually, yeah, I think it's published originally on the Frontiers in Sustainable Food Systems. And so what they're looking at is long-term assumptions. So we compare the temperature impact of beef cattle and cultured meat production at all times to 1,000 years in the future using for synthetic meat, greenhouse gas footprints currently available, and all that. So they're using here. I'm going to highlight it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So they are assuming how much is currently being used to produce lab meat. They're assuming we're going to stay at this level. We're not going to have any innovation in growing lab meat. And they scale that up to 1,000 years.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And besides that, methane becomes carbon dioxide, which they're not even, apparently they're not even looking at that.
Well, not the original study anyway. Of course, lab-grown meat isn't even on sale for public. Researchers making a lot of assumptions about meat consumption in the future.
When it's not even reached the ability to go to market, the cost of anything that hasn't made it to market is like a factor of 10. You know, the processes are fucking horrible on anything that hasn't been able to be brought to market yet. There's so much refinement that happens with any product, and that's why any brand new product on the market costs way the fuck more, because it costs way the fuck more to produce, because you don't have it right yet. So
it's prohibitively expensive right now.
Oh god, yes. So if they're going to use that logic, then we should say, well, since it's so expensive, for 1,000 years, it's never going to be usable anyway, so we can just forget about it, because nobody will be able to afford it. It's the same kind of flawed logic.
Yeah, so there's a lot of assumptions, but it is out there as a study that just came out 10 days ago? Less than 10 days. February 19th, so this is like super recent. And
the half of the bees, more than half of the bees dying was actually a recent news as well. So we are actually
talking about new seed.
I know we're talking about
it's baby news. It just happened.
Even though we seem to be hitting lots of other shit that isn't new news kind of thing. It's seeded by news.
So we went from CRISPR to sort of back around to food production, which leads us to insects. Again.
Yeah, the genetically modified insects.
Yeah, why are we talking about food? Because we're talking about bees dying.
Yeah, well, apparently they just recently had, they've been talking about using CRISPR-Cas9 to crash mosquito populations, where basically you have. So
also CRISPR.
Yeah. Yeah,
so okay, those of you who have CRISPR labs at home and want to make a gene sweep virus, dumb.
Yeah, don't do that. It's bad. It's stupid.
You'll die.
Everybody
will die.
You die. She dies. Everybody dies. So
don't make me die.
don't do that. That's not nice. This is like on the 20th. It came out that they were so one of the first. They've been talking about it for a while, but they're using way more care and thoughtfulness in the application of CRISPR, and this is just in fucking mosquitoes. And so the idea is that the numbers of mosquitoes that are present in certain environments you can't deal with via what's it called, just spraying poison. It's not feasible. But what you can do is release a few genetically altered mosquitoes to crash the population. Right. And so what they do is they can make it to breeding age, but they have genetic vulnerabilities that make it where they die more easily. And so
this reminds me of feeding Ray to cockroaches and letting them go home and breed with their babies.
Kind of, but this is specifically what happens is you have these.
See, that's why they're insects. Because they just said they go home and breed with their babies. There you go.
Bastards.
Insects.
Anyway, so they basically give them a genetic illness, and then make sure that genetic illness passes to all of the mosquitoes. And so one of the first tests of that is occurring, and they're going through I mean, they're going to such enormous lengths. So they've got a breed of the test that they're breeding on. They've been talking about doing this for like fucking nearly a decade now, at least. And so they first have this like special place, you know, where like multiple. You have to go through multiple doors, and it's like, you know, the keypad, like they're you know, dealing with some biological weapon or something. And they've got a lab in Italy where even the mosquitoes, if they escaped, they got to breed a mosquito that couldn't survive in that environment. So there's no other mosquitoes for it to even breed with in that environment, and it wouldn't, you know, live very long anyway. And so they're going to all this trouble, but they are now finally testing in the past few days the CRISPR Cas9, you know, crashing larger populations. They've already done it with smaller populations, and this is a very large test they're doing it inside this facility in Italy. So that was in the news, and that's neat. Then I guess we should just kind of go to some of the other.
Let's see. Do I have anything about insects?
Any more shit about insects? I think that might be.
Anything about incest? No, I don't think so.
No more incest.
No more incest. No, but I got the bees and the things. But yeah, if we're gonna go to space, I don't know if you're gonna talk about the Japan's Hayabusa spacecraft.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about it at some point, but go ahead.
No, that's fine. Because let's just go with curiosity and opportunity. So the recent news, RIP.
I know.
RIP Opportunity. You guys, I'm sure have heard about it. It was a little rover on Mars that was sent 14 years ago, and it was supposed to last 90 days, but it lasted 14 instead. 14 years instead of 90 days.
Yeah, 90 days to 14 years.
Yep, and recently there was a storm on Mars, and I'm gonna get emotional again. No, there's a storm on Mars, and they couldn't get in touch with the robot afterwards, so it's been essentially presumed dead, you know, missing in action. So
its mission was completed.
Yes, its mission was completed, and this is the emotional part. NASA, oh god damn it. Well, because NASA assholes, they were and I'm also looking at the D&D like card for it right now too, so which is great. But God bless geeks and nerds. But yeah, NASA was playing the robot some music, and like the last one was a love song, and it's really touching and emotional. And I'm a transhumanist, so robots are like our little pets. They're the best. Such a dutiful little servant for 14 years. And then just, you know.
A lot of people were very attached to it. I mean, there was not, you know, because, you know, you can end up imputing personality on something, especially when it looks like a little cute little robot with little robot eyes and stuff.
So, guys, check out the Umbrella Academy. If you're into that sort of deep, fucking heart-wrenching, sentimental shit. So yeah, there's a D&D card by Warlock Homebrew. They made it as a little construct that you can print out a card and use it in your D&D games. So
and it has a neat little story about how
it ended up in the
how it ended up there, because he went through some sort of
storm that it died in.
Actually
brought it to another plane.
Ported it to another plane, and and then people that some like gnome, you know,
found it.
It's a neat little story. Not gonna ruin it for you. Check it out.
All of that information will be available on patreon.com/AnnaCherry, because this show is brought to you by patrons such as yourself. So if you'd like to join the effort, support the podcast, which it will be with your help. Right now it's just a live show on YouTube, etc. We do have an RSS link. You can upload it to your favorite podcast player and get updates, though not as regularly as an actual podcast would be. So we'd love that. We'd love to be able to put this on Spotify and iTunes and Google Play and wherever else. Stitcher, I hear that's a thing. So we can do that with your help on patreon.com/AnnaCherry. I recommend the Challenger mode. It is something that allows you to hang out with us after the show and discuss some of the finer points, or just talk about random things and look at our cats, and just have a little fun chat with us afterwards, after every show. So that's a perk that you can get.
Then going back to the Mars rovers, though, their Curiosity had a scare. So so Curiosity.
Real quick, all of this information will be available in the Patreon post for this podcast. It'll include the audio file as well as all the references, and it's available to the public. So if you cannot support us on Patreon without hardship, don't. And instead you can follow our Patreon page, bookmark it,
whatever, check in for your free, public, available audio files of this podcast. Go ahead.
So there was just this little hiccup with the function of Curiosity, where they was stuck in some sort of
So I believe
safe
Curiosity
mode.
and Opportunity were sent out at the same time, or
I don't know. I think the Curiosity is
The second one?
is more recent,
okay.
and so it's.
I just know I associate them because they're both Mars rovers and they're named similarly, but
So it's back to working properly. Everything's cool with it after the little hiccup, but
what was the hiccup? I know you said it, I just missed it.
Well, I didn't give details because I that wasn't what was interesting to me.
Okay.
It had a little hiccup. Everything's cool, not a big deal. It just like so probably something having to do with storms, and it just ended up in like a little safe mode with things.
Oh, safe mode. Okay.
Right. So they were having trouble with it, but everything's back.
So they needed to press F11 up on booting.
Yeah, something. You're exactly. They had to hit delete. They had to spam the delete key, and then it came up. They got but what's interesting to me, however, is that it's now moving into an area where clay minerals can be seen from orbit, and so clay minerals they're an indication of something that where that they form in water, so it could have supported life. So it's about to come to somewhere that is a very interesting area. So there's a potential drill location that was sighted just 200 meters away, and so right now it's possible that as we speak, Curiosity could be discovering life on Mars. So it would be looking forward to that news after it gets some of its first drills. But I mean, usually I guess they don't, until they are really certain of it, they don't necessarily release
Curiosity,
much,
indeed.
so that's cool. That's good. That's good news that's finally investigating a little clay area. Apparently Bodie McBoatface is back in the news and is going to have this.
That's a bit of a deviation.
Oh, well, excuse me.
Because we're talking about space, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, I mentioned water. That was enough of a segue for me.
There you go. Perfect. Love it. And hey, a boat is a robot, so we can go right back.
Yeah,
to...
this is Bodie McBoatface is robotic. It's a little.
Oh, it's like
it's an autonomous underwater vehicle.
It's a droid.
Yeah.
Or
a
drone.
Yeah, sure.
No, it's a droid.
It's underwater drone.
It's a drone.
and so it's going to be doing a uninterrupted 2,000-mile crossing of the Arctic Ocean. So that's going to be
uninterrupted, as in like doesn't have any planned stops.
Yeah, I guess.
Because that's an odd way of putting it.
Right. So that Bodie McBoatface is out there in the news about to do some crazy stuff. So that's kind of cool. I don't know, because it's just funny. And then you want to go ahead and talk about the next thing, the space thing?
We don't have to.
Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to talk about it. All right. Well, then I was just gonna say, okay. And then now apparently, everybody knows the space shuttles were decommissioned. Well, apparently,
No, I don't. No, I don't know anything about
the
space.
shuttle. Well, okay. Well,
all I know is that Apollo 13 happened, or maybe it's a movie, or maybe both. I'm not.
Okay, so the shuttle, the picture that you're looking at?
Apollo.
Yeah, anyway,
that's
maybe that you think of it as Apollo.
Yeah,
so that's the space shuttle. And the space shuttle program basically it was kind of aging, and so eventually the design of it, was starting to get to the point at which they decided, that it's been used too many times. They decommissioned it.
Well, what did it do? Why
the space shuttle was going up into space, and they did
what?
things. Well, the space shuttle is what serviced the Hubble telescope when one of the mirrors was set wrong, and so they needed to do repairs on it in space.
So basically, anytime we want to go into our orbit, we use the shuttle.
Typically, we use the shuttle.
Oh, so it's like a shuttle.
Now,
it's a shuttle.
Yes.
Let's start.
Except it's got huge tanks of gas,
oh.
and first there's 2 solid fuel rockets, and then 1 liquid fuel, fucking huge thing, and then anyway. So the space shuttle program was decommissioned, fairly recent in.
What the fuck did they use instead?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm actually completely certain of. I don't know. Maybe nothing. I think we're just like fuck space.
No, Space Force.
No, yeah, no. They do have some place, but anyway, the shuttle program they're now actually using parts from the shuttles, and so it's so they're kind of like they're Frankensteining the old shuttle program and using pieces for new systems. So yeah, that's just kind of an interesting thing that they're doing. So it's apparently,
Rebirth is in the title, so
yeah. Well, there's like a DARPA space plane called the Phantom Express, and then there's a
I'm sorry, what?
a space plane called the Phantom Express, and then there's like a
Stop it, DARPA! You're already villainous and cartoonishly villainous enough.
I know, of course, we're gonna have the Phantom Express. Anyway,
silly.
I know.
So many nerds that
Yes, we'll call
we're
it.
evil scientists. No, you know they're loving it over there at DARPA.
Of course.
Yeah. I would name it that.
The
Too.
modified leftover shuttle engines will power NASA's delayed space launch system, the SLS, which is a big vehicle for lunar missions and eventually Mars. So that's.
Our cat got through, so he's
but
very happy.
then back more in some more Mars news, or not Mars news, space news. The SpaceX is about. I think they launched already the first private lunar lander. So that's neat. And
well, it says watch it. So
yeah. So I think it's already been launched. Yeah, no, you can go online and watch the launch of it if you want.
4 days ago.
Yeah, so that was recent. So that's going to be the first private mission to the moon and landing something there. So that's still got a couple of months before it lands. I think, is that right?
To this date. To this date, only 3 nations have landed on the moon: United States, Russia, and China.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then it'll be
United States again. And that'll be the first corporation, private company, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
To land it. See, capitalism works. Except, who were the first to go into space? Russians! I'm sorry, what? Okay. I'm just excited about, as a Russian, I'm excited about space and our ability to go to it first. Sorry.
First, bitch. So the
and of course Gagarin came back trolling, saying that I saw no God up there.
Oh yeah.
Oh
that's right.
snap!
Oh,
that was just uncalled for.
That was unnecessary. Too soon.
Yes.
So there's another thing where there's a Japanese space probe that landed on
an asteroid.
Ryuga. Ryuga Wakateki Wakuro.
And that's the name of the asteroid. The spacecraft is Hayabusa 2.
Yeah, and
it's Japan's.
Fired a bullet into the surface.
So wait. The spaceship is Japanese, but clearly they also claimed the naming rights to the asteroid.
I would imagine that's true.
Good for them. It's a 3,000-foot wide Ryugu asteroid. What the fuck's a Ryugu? It sounds like it's like a class of asteroids. That's strange. It can't be.
Ryuga is like something about a dragon, I think, right?
Ryuga Wateki Wakuro.
Yep.
162173.
Hold on.
Ryugu.
Hold on. Let's translate.
It's a near-Earth object.
Translate.
Yeah, they named it. Well, somebody named it. It's a near-Earth object and a potentially hazardous asteroid of the Apollo group. See, Apollo. There it is. It measures approximately 1 kilometer or 0.6 miles for the Europeans. No, not the Europeans, for the Americans. So 0.6 miles or 1 kilometer in diameter, and is a dark object of the rare spectral type CG, which qualifies as a both C-type asteroid and a G-type asteroid. Whoa, hype! In June 2018, a spacecraft, Hayabusa 2, arrived at the asteroid. So they've been there for a year now.
Interesting. But they will be the first returning.
It was named Ryugu by the Minor Planet Center on 20th of September. The name refers to Ryugu Dragon Palace, a magical underwater palace in a Japanese folktale.
Okay.
In the story, the fisherman Urashima Taro from Psyche K travels to the palace on the back of a turtle, and when he returns, he carries with him a mysterious box, much like the Hayabusa is returning with samples.
Huh, neat.
Yeah, that's so cute. So watch Psyche K if you guys have Netflix, because they actually have the story that they do as a school play in one of their episodes.
Really?
Remember where they were going to have those lavish decorations of the guy riding a turtle?
That's right!
Going to the underwater palace with the princess.
I forgot about that. Oh my god.
That's a thing.
That's great. Okay, so but what's cool is that's going to be the first. They're going to we've got the U.S. has something that went and collected samples, but this satellite will return with its samples from a collected from an asteroid before our satellite does. So
ours is still on its way back.
Yeah, and so
from elsewhere, not Ryugu, but somewhere else.
No, somewhere else. I forget which one or what, but
sure.
it'll be the first one to return. Anyway, is the Japanese one.
Oh shit! Asia beats US again.
Oh no.
Snap!
You're so salty, or not salty. What is it? You're so.
You mad, bro? No,
you're so trolling.
I am trolling. Trolling.
So that should be neat because once again that's another who knows what we'll find is on asteroids. A lot of people there's all of these discoveries of is that supposed to be frozen like that?
No, that's us.
Okay.
Yes.
There's all these discoveries of organic chemicals in space. Like they've been finding organic chemicals in large bands, complex organic chemicals in large bands between galaxies. So it's like there are interesting organic compounds that may even include some rudimentary amino acids possibly. So there's
why we're talking about this because other than it's fucking cool is that the asteroid landed on February 22nd, a couple of days ago, 8 a.m. Local time in Japan, and it comes with bullets. That's like why we're talking about it, because it's going to fire a bullet into the asteroid. It's about to do the thing.
I think it's going to may be doing it more than once.
Right. Because 2 shots were, because it needs to collect stuff with its sampling arm. 2 shots will be fired initially. A large projectile will be shot later this year to stir up additional material. So they're going to rocket fucking shoot it. So a rocky start. The craft's landing on Ryugu was supposed to happen last October. But it was discovered the surface of the asteroid was covered in a larger gravel than the team expected. So, to make sure the collection system would work, the researchers performed some experiments on Earth. They fired a bullet into gravel using spare launchers that were made during the manufacturing of this. So they used spare parts. So Japanese. They used proper science. They used spare parts. So unlike those scientists that were speculating about the beef and all that, they used actual spare launcher things that were made during the same manufacturing process as the spaceship. And they tested it and see what would happen if they, shot with it in space. And why it matters, because the spacecraft's precursor, the Hayabusa, is the only spacecraft to date to have collected material from an asteroid and returned it to Earth. So that's already been done.
Already been done? Wait a minute. Did I misunderstand?
Maybe it was the first one. But that's, Hayabusa 1, or the OG Hayabusa, collected material from an asteroid and returned to Earth. The newest craft will provide more detailed measurements, building on the knowledge established by the original. The Hayabusa 2 will return to Earth in late 2020 with samples from Ryugu. So, looks like it's going to be coming back in 2020. Do we have a date on when the US one will be coming back?
Yeah, they were both in some article that I read.
What's the name of the US one, so I can just find it?
I don't know. But I thought it was pretty interesting that the Japanese made sure that they were going to be first to bring back we're still less resting on our laurels too. We're like, Russia's like, fuck it, we were the first in space, bitches. And then America's like, yeah, first on the moon, bitches. And so other countries are like, well, we gotta be first in something, fuck you.
That all space race. So I don't know if it was the Osiris Rex probe that you were talking about, or...
I'm not sure. I wish I could find it easily, but it's just not coming up here. Maybe I totally closed I may have looked at multiple articles and closed off the other article that had the information. But yeah, it's...
okay. So there is one. Yeah, Osiris Rex, whose name stands for Origin, Spectral Interpretation, Resource Identification, Security, Regolith. Explorer. Ship fuck is a regolith? It's like a monolith, but with reg in it instead. It won't leave Bennu until March 2021. And Hayabusa 2 will come back in 2020. So yes.
There we go.
That is accurate. Why go to asteroid Bennu? NASA gets animated. There's a little short, I'm assuming. It's short. You guys can watch, 2 minutes 42 seconds. So all of these resources will be up on the Patreon post whenever I get around to it. Likely next month. Hopefully by the end of this month, but I got shit to do. And this stuff is free, all right? If you want this stuff to come out faster, support us on Patreon, please.
That's cute. But yeah, I think that was it for most of the news stories I thought were interesting.
Space,
Anyway.
yeah.
I mean, there's other news stories, but you know.
But face. We got massive. Yeah, I think.
I mean, like there was
that's it.
they discovered that Neanderthals were probably inbreeding. Whoop-de-doo. Almost certainly, humans have been inbreeding too. They don't really have anything other than
Themselves?
they were. It's like that's not really news. It's like it's obvious. It's like humans are inbreeding right fucking now. And they don't even know to what extent they were inbreeding. It's
or
just
why
like this,
or how.
yeah, so that's like, how is that news? It's like,
hey, you guys, sex news that won't get most people offended, but they get still to talk about sex.
I guess.
So yeah, that's not fun.
Oh wait, I didn't even notice there's a NASA greenlight SpaceX crew to capsule a capsule test to ISS. What is this? Oh, it's like, so basically, there's a capsule that NASA has. Let's see. On Friday, gave SpaceX a green light to test a new crew capsule by first sending an unmanned craft with a life-size mannequin to the International Space Station. So that's cool. But
Yeah.
okay.
Crew Dragon?
Hmm?
To take the Crew Dragon test capsule.
Oh, neat. I guess that's the name of it, Crew Dragon.
So does that mean it'll be 7 seats? So it'll be bringing people. So like it is what it sounds like. It'll be delivering people to the International Space Station, right?
Is that accurate? Maybe so. Because I was at first I was thinking it would be like an attachment because the space station's supposed to like grow with like attachments and
well,
shit.
maybe that's what it is.
Let's see. But it may just be.
You're talking about SpaceX has already made more than a dozen unmanned trips since 2012 with supplies to the ISS. And so this is going to be, I guess, a test. So somebody who's involved with this said, I guarantee everything will not work out exactly right. And that's cool. That's exactly what we wanted to do. They're troubleshooting.
Yeah, okay, no, it's just about...
to transport their astronauts,
yeah. In other words, it's manned spaceflight. And so basically they're having to get, they have to prove that they can do manned spaceflight.
Yeah, this will be the first time the U.S. Space Agency let a private sector company transport their astronauts. So another first for SpaceX.
No, neat. Yeah. Okay, well that actually is good. How did I miss that? Whatever.
That's a really big list of stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Then again, it does start off with all caps NASA, but whatever.
Yeah, and then also, I guess I was drawn to this. There's this kid who has a nuclear reactor in his that he built. Theoretically, he built.
Let's talk about it.
At 12, I don't believe it.
I mean,
there's yeah, exactly. Over and over, you have these child prodigies, which are basically just parents who are getting rich through saying that their kid did it, or they're getting famous. I mean, through saying that their kid did it. And so,
but they did it themselves.
Yeah, almost always. It's a constant thing.
Not familiar, actually.
Yeah, it happens all the time. But then apparently Israel's private lunar lander blasted off from the moon. How did I miss that one? Man, I'm just like,
don't tell
I'm
people
just
you missed
missing it, man. Okay, no, I didn't miss it. I'm bringing it up right now.
We're talking about space. We've got more space news.
I got no more space news. It's just right here, right now, live.
Exactly.
Live space news.
Wait. We're getting
the ticker went off and okay, let me read the
telegraph.
Yeah, little telegraph from space.
They do say that old technology is the most reliable one sometimes. Actually, that is true. Aren't there computers in not the NSA, can't be NSA. Is it the CIA, the NSA, Department of Defense? One of those, they're using computers from like the 60s because it's actually the most secure thing to do because you can't, it's like, it's off the grid, man. You can't hack it if it's not connected to the grid. It's like really old stuff from the 70s. So let's see, U.S.
Oh, wait. So Israel is helping fund it or something on Thursday evening. So this is SpaceX launched its first rocket.
Okay. I'm sure.
Of the year from Cape Canaveral and Texas' first lander with private money. Okay, so basically I think that somehow Israel is involved with that lander that's SpaceX.
Weird. So
why are they saying Israel here? It doesn't make that clear.
let's see. The Israeli spacecraft Bereshit will gradually raise its orbit to reach the moon, landing after about a month and a half of flight. So what does that have to do with SpaceX? Oh, to date there are only 3 nations landed on the moon, I should have kept reading that sentence. Oh my god, because I was reading that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in a different article, and it like has that exact when I said only 3 nations to date.
Okay, it must be that Israel built the lander and they're using a SpaceX rocket. Maybe that's what it is. That must be what's going on.
SpaceX rocket launches Israeli lander
That's
on
gotta
the
be what
moon.
it is.
So first private company to do it, and Israel will be the 4th nation to join the space race, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean makes sense.
That must be it.
Like out of those 3 countries, you are missing Israel in terms of world powers.
Yeah.
Of those 3, in terms of dictating policy and having relations with other countries on they're the big boys, they're the big players. So that totally makes sense. They're the top 5. Not really sure who the last 5th one would be, other than like all of Europe. Well, probably United Kingdom. So let's see. This actually reminds me of the cats losing their mind. But so we're talking about robots, death, life, all of that. I did find the oldest 10 systems in terms of IT that the government uses. Would you be interested in that, or should we save that for our patrons? Well, I mean, it's just fun. Why would we save this for patrons? We love you, patrons, but I want to share.
Well, I mean, some of the old nuclear, the longest time, they're still on the big fucking 5. No, I think there was even bigger floppies. They were literally on fucking floppy disks, which was just really unreliable technology. But it's so impossible to hack that that using really old technology basically kept the security extremely high on our nuclear systems by using this ancient fucking technology.
Right, this is exactly along those lines, but it doesn't really go with everything. So I need to find a way to get patron shows recorded or something, so that way we could actually cover extra stories and have it be like a little extra extension of the show. A little extra. But right now I'm comfortable with doing it as just an after party where because not everyone necessarily watches our show beforehand. Sometimes they don't have time because they just got off work, or they're watching it some other time, or I fucked up the schedule. Who knows? Usually the latter. So just kind of hanging out and talking about random stuff is kind of what we excel at anyway in the after show. So let's just keep it chill like that and talk about all the sciencey shit directly as a newscast on the news feed. So let's do a fun little ending the news seed with an old seed. The application programming languages undergirding some federal IT systems were new when the Andy Griffith Show premiered.
That's great.
And they're still there. So the question is how outdated some of these programs are. Well, yeah, the Andy Griffith Show premiered, and these federal IT systems were new at the time, and they're still in place. And that's excuse me, how many years later?
That was 1960s, I think.
Yeah. So, chart below lists details about the 10 oldest legacy systems still in use in the federal government.
No, it's even older.
Premiere of the Griffith Show.
Alright, when was the Griffith Show?
I would see it occasionally on Nick at Night, and it would look like the most boring fucking shit ever. I would actually go into a mini rage when I saw the Andy Griffith Show come on, by the way. I was iceberged about that show because I just moved to America. The TV was a thing, and Nickelodeon was amazing, and they would put that on? What a waste of time. What a waste of life. Why would anyone watch it? It's not even in color. I mean, now as a fan of the Twilight Zone, the color has no bearing on the value of a show. But wow, was it always boring. Anytime I saw clips of it, it was boring.
Okay, yeah, apparently it was October 3rd, 1960 was the first episode of
so
it.
All right, so let's go through the list of 1 through 10. So somebody says it's a situation analogous to operating a 1960s automobile with the original chassis, suspension, and drivetrain, but with a more modern engine, satellite radio, and a GPS navigation system. So, I mean, it makes sense. You know, if it works, don't break it, I guess. So let's go. Number 1, agency, Treasury Department / the IRS. The system that it uses is individual master file, and it is approximately 56 years old.
Jesus.
What is it? The massive application that receives taxpayer data and dispenses refunds.
Oh, well.
Only
No
that.
wonder they didn't update that.
This investment is written in assembly language code, a low-level computer code that is difficult to write and maintain and operates on an IBM mainframe. So it's difficult to write and maintain. Why?
Yeah, not that many people. Even games, like one of the last vestiges of using assembler was like in gaming. It was like the way, what was it? Quake was still, a lot of it was written in assembly when assembly was already old at that point, and that was like how Carmack made it so powerful and beyond all the other technologies because he was writing in assembly. And so that's
neat. Speaking of assembly, the second is also the Treasury Department / the IRS because they have Business Master File, and it's also approximately 56 years old, and it's a companion system that maintains data on business income. So they have 2 separate super ancient systems. The system also runs on assembly language code and operates on IBM mainframe. So then we have number 3, the Defense Department. There it is. The system that it uses is Strategic Automated Command and Control System. No wonder they didn't change it. They love that name.
Yeah, no, we're not changing this ever.
SACCS. Alright. So it's like ASCII, but sex. It sucks.
It sucks.
It sucks. So they're Bostonites. Strategic Automated Command and Control System. I love that. We need to use that in some cyberpunk game.
Yes.
I've been playing System Shock lately on Flexstorm, so this is right up my alley. Reported age, 53 years old. So we're going in order of oldest to least old. So the IRS has the oldest.
Of course.
The next one is only the Defense Department.
Yeah.
And what is it? The system that coordinates U.S. nuclear forces.
8-inch floppy disks.
It runs on 1970s era IBM computer system and uses 8-inch floppy disks.
And a floppy disk, the data goes bad on those if you just like look at them the wrong way. It's like it's such a
all 80 kilobytes of data.
Yeah,
goes bad.
All 80 full 80 kilobytes on a fucking 8-inch floppy disk.
Each disk holds 80 kilobytes of data, meaning it would take more than 3.2 million floppy disks to equal the storage power of a single modern flash drive. Which those go up to like 30, 18, 21. I really haven't seen USB sticks. Well, I guess they can make them terabyte size.
Who the fuck knows?
But
no, I don't think they.
Not really.
I don't think they make them terabyte.
There's a company that's trying to, and they're like really small and slick. Not a USB stick, no, but like approximation, a sexy approximation. But yeah, I think I've seen 21 as the biggest USB. 18 or 16 for sure.
Gigs? No, they're way bigger than that.
Really? They go up to 64 and 128.
I think they like I've seen like a 128 gig like,
USB. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3.2 million floppy disks on an average USB. So the good news though, the Pentagon is planning for upgrades.
That's not good news.
Including updated data storage and desktop terminals.
I'm running those fucking things with like an abacus and a fucking.
I'm sorry. The Pentagon is planning for upgrades, including desktop terminals by the end of 2017. Desktop terminals? What does that mean?
Well,
that means you can't have that. So they're like, I'm gonna upgrade, like, to have a disk, and.
Well, they're just gonna upgrade it to like a desktop computer. I mean,
as opposed to what?
As opposed to
that's my question.
Mainframes. Well, I mean, like old mainframe, like server, and I don't know.
But how do you access servers then? Because I know nothing about.
Well, there used to be that you'd have one computer and then
Beyond
you'd have cords going to it, and
See, Halt and Catch Fire didn't teach me as much about computers, oddly, as much as Maniac did. The one that has the big computer, Greta, and all of that, like that. So that's a mainframe, right?
Probably.
So how do you access
well,
it? You have a little terminal, though,
So
right?
a terminal is basically okay. Like for instance, you know how you've got a keyboard and a screen here,
Right.
but there's all kinds of computing components in here that do the computation and storage and all of that. Whereas with when you just got like a terminal, it's basically just a keyboard and a screen. That's all it fucking does, and it's sending information to the server. And the server
Right, so,
is just one
okay.
big machine that handles multiple terminals.
It's the same question still then. So if they have to upgrade, do they mean upgrade
No
to
fucking clue.
desktop terminals or just get newer ones?
Yeah, it's not very clear.
Okay, because otherwise, okay.
And it says scheduled for 2017. It's like, what happened?
Cats. Gallo had food, so he's like really happy right now and losing his mind. Okay. Now, the next one, of course, after the Defense Department, we have the Veterans Affairs Department. Well, no wonder they have so many problems. It's personnel, the system that uses is personnel and accounting integrated data. And it's also 53 years old. So what is it? It's an automated time and attendance tracker for veterans, I guess. It runs on COBOL, the 1950s computer programming language, and on IBM mainframe computers. VA plans to replace it with HR shared service platforms in 2017. I mean, this was written in 2016, so it's just the only compilation that we had at the moment. And of course, the IBM, we keep talking about them, weren't Nazis using IBM computers to do their Naziing?
Yeah, they were cataloging, like, you know, how many...
Those gypsies who got bleach put in their eyes?
Right, yes.
Yeah, cool.
They're keeping up with it.
Thanks, IBM.
Yeah, they were able to, you know, coordinate the murder a little bit.
Hey, see? There you go. Capitalism first in space. Capitalism first in Nazi death camps.
Yeah.
I mean,
First
good
in
job, capitalism.
everything. Everything. Right,
But well, we never said it wasn't number one in
That's right.
everything. In lead poisoned children, in
everything.
Everything.
Literally everything.
So you know,
Right.
if you're not first, you're last.
Next.
I'm sorry. I'm letting my liberal panties show.
Yes, that's right.
So number 5, Defense Department again. System Compass. Reported age 52 years old. What is it? The computerized movement planning and status system is used to help determine when Army equipment should be removed, replaced, or discarded.
Oh, that's great. They use a 52-year-old computer to decide when. The irony. That's the best part of this whole article, right there. They could have just had that. Matter of fact, that'd be made into a fucking meme. It's like the system that decides when shit is too old and should be replaced is itself old as shit. That's great. Love it.
So the great part about this 52-year-old system called Compass, that computerized movement planning and status system, because they love acronyms in the military, is used to help determine when Army equipment should be removed, replaced, or discarded. The system currently runs on Windows 2008 server and uses 2009 Oracle 11 gigabyte
What?
database.
Well, how is it 52 years old?
Because the
'cause they've been-
system
okay,
runs
they-
on Windows instead of IBM.
What? How the fuck?
I
do
don't
they-
know, but check this out. The fun part about it all is that there is a desert in California. Doyle, California. It's called the Sierra Army Depot, where it's this giant desert lined with tanks. Because there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Because the Army just keeps buying them. And not doing it, because the system is 52 years old, basically, is what I'm saying. So there's this entire Sierra Army Depot. It's a 36,000 acre repository for U.S. Army's tanks, trucks, and armored personnel carriers. And this is surplus. It was purchased
More than
and not
26,000
used.
armored vehicles stand ready.
They are ready
They're ready.
for anything.
Those are the ones just in storage.
And they're calling them, the Army set up shop during World War II. They used the base to store vast quantities of bombs and ammunition in hundreds of armored igloos. We've seen those.
Armored igloos?
Remember the weird domes that we saw in Irvine, and we were like, "What the shit fuck is that?" And then we Googled it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's
I
right.
think that's that near Pacific ports, because World War II. So that's why they're in Irvine. Orange County, very close to all of that. So over decades, stockpiles of weaponry. The massive buildup in Sierra doesn't really result in military necessity. It's actually something of a congressional boondoggle. Army leadership has been calling for a suspension of Abrams tank production for years, but alas, military spending is the domain of the Congressional Appropriation Committee. And when it comes to Abrams, Congress says more tanks. So it actually has nothing to do with the system. It has to do with unholy alliance of apparently the Congressional Appropriations Committee and this company called Abrams that produces the tanks.
It's always been the military-industrial complex. I mean, it's not like that's a new term that we just came up with, or was some sort of like conspiracy theorist. It was a president that was talking about. It was multiple presidents from way the fuck back talking about the military-industrial complex.
Didn't actually Eisenhower say something about the military?
Maybe.
And he was a general, which is just bizarre.
Yeah. Was it Eisenhower? Well, yeah. Oh, yeah.
On January 17th, 1961, President Eisenhower said this.
Gave a dire warning.
President Eisenhower's farewell address to the nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. Good evening, my fellow Americans. We now stand 10 years past the midpoint of a century that has witnessed 4 major wars among great nations.
Wait, he didn't say that.
That music got me in the feels.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
It's so sad.
Yeah, I know. A dire warning that was not heeded.
1971, folks. So we didn't come up with the term. Eisenhower did.
Is that 1971?
1971.
Yeah, maybe, well, you know, it was 71? Are you sure about that? That doesn't sound right.
I think so.
That doesn't sound right.
Oh, 61, sorry.
Okay, yeah, that's better.
It was January 17th was throwing me off.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know about that. Okay, yeah. 61? Okay.
Yeah, 61. This is best quality address. But I like that one because it had the words.
Written out.
And a bit of a late scroll, but yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we started on a low note and we ended on a low note.
Indeed. So that all happened. And yeah, but no, we're talking about the I can't find my resource of all the tanks that are accruing, there we go, in the desert of California, because the Congressional Committee has an issue with ethics and a company named Abrams. So they're like tanks, like World War II style, just
More
like
tanks. More tanks.
tanks, you know. And it's like, unless
I
we're gonna
think-
have to defend our, you know, borders against, I don't know, flying, like what can you defend on the U.S. soil with that many tanks? Like, I don't know, maybe aliens. If aliens invade,
If aliens invade, we got the tanks to
for
take
each
out.
individual, you'll see. Government will be like, Trump will be like,
Roll out the
I
tanks.
need you to go. Wait, that's Bill Clinton.
Trump, Bill
No,
Clinton.
actually-
What's the difference?
Actually, yeah, there's great pictures of them schmoozing and all that. But that's back when he was a Democrat. He's not anymore.
No, he's not.
No,
Right?
he's a GOP now, so it's different. But yeah, that's unless the aliens invade, I really don't see a need for all these tanks. But you know, if they do,
If aliens invade, tanks won't do shit.
you don't know that.
Yes, I do.
They absolutely might help in some way.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm sure that the aliens that have decided to take on a planet militarily, that have come from vast different distances, won't have the technology to deal with our tanks. No, and they'll definitely have problems with those tanks. Let me tell you.
So to address a comment from the chat, I do believe that U.S. behavior in the world currently seems to be very much dictated by the military-industrial complex, and I believe the U.S. has the largest defense spending, tax dollars going to defense / defense budget in the world.
Not just
So-
largest in the world, it's largest by like orders of magnitude. It's like literally like I think our budget may be higher than the rest of the world combined or something. Which is, I mean, China's been fucking gearing up for a while, and I think we're still like outpacing them by just massive amounts.
Let's see, U.S. defense spending compared to other countries. Yeah, it is bigger than all the other countries combined. And the other countries we're talking about: China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, France, United Kingdom, and Japan. All of those countries combined have a defense spending of $578 billion, while U.S. has $610 billion.
And that was, and we're
And
continuing
that
to
was in
ramp up.
Well, that's 2018, yeah, so it's recent.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's a thing.
Yeah, and you know, and we're sending a peace over the border into
Peace bombs?
Venezuela. We
Oh,
got
well, we're
peace bombs
definitely
going
sending-
everywhere.
sending-
But all right, let's call this. This is not a political podcast.
Hey, I'm just answering questions from chat. If anybody else wants to say something, I'll address that. You know, no, I'm, you know, I've stayed away from being a commentary channel on the YouTubes, but I don't shy away from this conversation in our podcast. So since outrage and hate watching is already something people do on YouTube anyway, might as well give them fodder and, you know, use the controversy to our advantage to grow the channel and the podcast.
That's right.
I'm all about that. Come at me, bro. Debate me. 1v1 me, bro. Oh, I just threatened you. Fucking watch out.
We're
That happened.
you like debate. As a matter of fact, you like.
I like to master a debate.
Yeah, you are a master debater. I'm a pretty master debater myself.
You're
Matter of
quite
fact,
the
we're-
master debater. We
yeah.
are indeed a team.
As a matter of fact,
master
we
debaters.
engage in mass debation. It's a whole lot of debation.
every day,
Yes, right. It's true.
every
Absolutely.
single day, but sometimes not on Thursdays.
Sometimes
We take
Not on
Thursdays off from mass
Thursdays.
debation. Indeed.
large scale mass debation.
Well, yeah, I mean, we get a lot of viewers every day. So that's
Sure.
quite a large amount. So I find that it's a good thing.
Oh,
like
that'd be
this
funny. they're poised to invade a medieval country. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, we're getting for those who are watching the stream instead of listening to it, you can see chat updates. But what you can't see, I will tell you. There's a great science fiction series by Harry Turtledove about a slow developing alien species who arrives using slower than light travel, poised to invade a medieval country based on their probes. But I'm assuming it's not. Okay, because their experience is based on slow developing races, and they assume centuries old data is current. Yeah, that's fun. Reminds me of the grown meat thing, but like the opposite of that. Just how varied our assumptions are about things.
Mhm.
And when you use current rate of growth that actually ends up being very misleading because it ends up being an exponential thing. There was something recently that came up. I don't remember. I wish I remembered what it was because it was somewhat relevant. But we're talking about maybe it was actually about science or like physics or something. But there's what is it called? Exponential growth, is that right, or is it some other word for it? When
For what?
it doesn't. So it doesn't when you double something and then you double it again and then you double it again.
Yeah, exponential growth.
Right, but then there's one that when you double it, it actually becomes like greater than.
In other words, it's
the other way of growing where it's
non-linear. It's
it's something like that where it's like with technology in particular, the curve of growth. I believe
exponential works.
Okay,
So,
I believe what's his face. Kurzweil was talking about this in the singularity, where it's like the way the speed at which technology develops. It's not a. So you have, let's say, 5 years to reach one innovation,
mm-hmm.
and then the next innovation it takes you 3 years, and the next one it takes you a year, then 6 months, then so it's faster and faster and faster. So it's not a linear. But
right.
an exponential.
Yeah,
okay.
Geometric progression. Yeah, that's a good term for it too.
Right. So that's something that we need to be especially aware of, I think, when it comes to assumptions and predictions, because technology in particular seems to grow at a almost, I would say, unpredictable rate because of the leaps that it takes.
Mm-hmm.
Because we, just look at the past. Let's look at the past 100 years where we started off with the rockets that we still use today for the most part in the past 50 or more years. But then you look at cell phones or biotechnology.
Mm-hmm.
And we had, those clunky, terrible phones in just the 80s. And now we have craziness, practically implantable phones,
mm-hmm.
like Google Glass, like shit like that. So just in the past 30 years. So it's been one of those things that technology in particular I think is vulnerable to this kind of thing, and we need to keep that in mind when we're estimating that some things don't grow like we expect them to, but
Mm-hmm. Oh
yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, where it's not just the growth that's growing, but the rate of growth that's
mm-hmm.
growing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah, and you can't rely on established rate because of the nature of. There's still some word that I haven't quite found yet.
Well, geometric regression is.
No, I've never heard of that in my life. Like
really?
No, it's like a particular word of something is. It's I don't know.
A bell curve?
It's more. It's not a technical term necessarily. It's like one word, and it's similar to the singularity, where it's like it's a one word description of this jump in.
A quantum leap.
That's 2 words. But no, I'm sure I'll think of it like in the middle of the night tomorrow. So
Yeah. Yep.
We'll go now and engage in some more masturbation with our patrons. But thank you all for watching, and of course I'll bring your attention once more to today's sponsor, patreon.com/AnnaCherry. As well as our challenger patrons and everyone in tiers higher than that. So thank you all to our 20-something patrons.
They're so inspired, they're in tears. Don't worry about
it. Yes. Yes, indeed. It's the day's wrapping up for me a little bit. So
I know. I'm a little out of it myself.
Excellent. So you can blame my political rants on that. But hey, when have I not been political? It's just like comics. They've always been political. So if you want to mass debate with us, or if you happen to agree, join our echo chamber and let's do it. We also have a Discord and all the other stuff. Can you call it an echo chamber when you have also people that disagree with you?
I don't think so.
See, we don't have a safe space. We have a mosh pit. So, wear your comfiest Nerf gear and come on over. And we will see you guys later. Thank you for watching and listening. Bye.